Hello, this is HorrorTube. Today I have a really unusual scenario for you. It occurred in the United States, and it is disturbing. What My Wife Really Looks Like is the title. Let's get started straight now. The Ruff family lived in East Texas, USA, in 2003, and they were a prominent family in the neighborhood. Because of their family's real estate and banking businesses, they had a lot of money. They were naturally wealthy and had access to all the affluent people's social gatherings, so they had a lot of good contacts. In a nutshell, they were the neighborhood's envy. Their son, John Blake Ruff, was living the good life as a college student studying economics and working for a big American news outfit. Then one day, Blake brings home a woman with whom he intends to spend the rest of his life. Lori Erica Kennedy is her name, and they met at a Christian Bible study. The Ruffs are overjoyed and invite his girlfriend to supper. When they first meet her, they see she has a fantastic personality and is a very pretty girlfriend. But something isn't quite right. You have a lot of questions for your boyfriend's parents because you're meeting them for the first time, right? So I inquire about her past, such as how was high school. And she just stammers a little. It was all good, she'll remark, or something along those lines. And she never speaks about her family. He appears to be wary. Anyway, the lunch goes smoothly, and the parents receive an unexpected anecdote from their son Blake afterward. It's a heartbreaking narrative about how both of her parents died when she was young, and she grew up alone as an only kid. Rory, unusually, dislikes discussing her childhood. She was in such much misery that she destroyed all of her family photographs. It aggravated her parents' feelings even more. Blake and Rory were married a year later. Because the Ruffs were so well known, they were overjoyed to announce their son's wedding to the entire neighborhood. Rory, for whatever reason, was opposed to the notion and preferred a quiet wedding. They ended up holding a tiny ceremony at a small church in the suburbs with only one witness. Following that, the couple purchased a home in the little town of Leonard, Texas, and began their married life. A closer glance indicates that Blake, the spouse, is a highly outgoing and social person. Lori, his wife, on the other hand, was an introvert. Neighbors said that she would typically spend the day at home and then return late at night to roam about the yard alone. But what was intriguing was her interest in her husband's family, the Ruff family tree. I believe she was fascinated with her family. Meanwhile, there was one thing she desperately desired: pregnancy. But it wasn't as simple as she had hoped. She miscarried numerous times, and 4 years passed till 2008. Rory finally gets the baby girl of her dreams after a successful IVF treatment. But that's when Rory's demeanor began to shift. She grew obsessive in her protection of her daughter. She even carries her to and from the bathroom. And she wouldn't let go of her for a second. She refused to show her daughter to anyone, as if she were guarding a treasure. My husband's family was the same way. She would always fabricate an excuse to miss a family function, and Blake's parents were never allowed to see their grandchild. This was becoming extremely aggravating for both the family and Blake. He attempted to rebuild their connection by attending couples counseling, but his wife's closed-off attitude remained. Blake eventually chose to divorce, moved back home with his family, and filed for divorce. This occurred only 2 years after the child was born. Unfortunately, Lori and her daughter appeared extremely unstable after that. According to neighbors, they both appeared to be emaciated and were frequently seen roaming around the house helplessly. Fast forward to Christmas Eve morning, December 24, 2010. Blake's father was on his way out the door to get the newspaper. He observed a strange black automobile parked in front of the house's driveway. He approached closer and noticed the automobile was still running. I had a feeling something was amiss, so I went inside the automobile. What he saw on the inside was terrifying. Lori, his son Blake's wife, was lying on the ground with a gunshot wound. She had committed suicide. When the police arrived and searched her body, they discovered 2 letters on the seat next to her. One was an 11-page letter to her husband, and the other was for her 18-year-old daughter to read. It's strange that the police picked up the letters first and examined them. There's no legitimate reason for Rory to make the decisions she did. There's only the standard "I've had a good life, take care of my daughter" message. Lori's funeral was held, and her bereaved husband, Blake, returned to their honeymoon home sometime later and began sorting through her stuff. He discovers a weird box deep within a closet. Lori had hidden it, but he had seen it before. He'd assumed it was her personal stuff because she'd swore she'd never open it. A padlock was used to secure the box. But now that she's gone, he'll be able to open it. Blake unlocks the door and discovers a surprise within. It was a birth certificate for a baby girl. Becky's Turner is the name on the paper. However, there existed another court certificate. Becky's name was changed to Rory Katie in 1988. So his wife, whom he'd always called Lori, was actually named Bex. My husband was astonished, but more importantly, he was intrigued. What made her alter her name? He was really inquisitive. His wife's background was shrouded in mystery. As a result, he hired a private investigator to find this woman named Becky's Turner. He receives a call back and learns that she is already deceased, having died in a fire in 1971. But she died when she was just 2 years old. What exactly is going on here? So, if I had to guess, Lori stole someone else's identity and then changed her name again. But who was Rory to begin with? Let's go over the timetable. This Lori obtained a copy of Becky's birth certificate in 1969. She obtained an identification card in 1988, claiming to be Bex Turner. But, didn't Bex die 2 years after she was born? There was a legal loophole. Because the United States has more than 50 states, births and deaths are usually recorded by the state. Becky was born in California, but she passed away in another state. There had been an administrative error, and the data had not been updated. Rory was able to utilize it to obtain identification. So, at the age of 18, she became Becky's, and 2 months later, in court, she changed her name to Lori Erica Kennedy. She subsequently obtained a social security number, obtained her GED, and began a new life studying business at the University of Texas. Which leads to the question: what was her identity if she wasn't Becky or Lori? Was she a criminal in need of identity theft? Or are you a spy? After the matter became public, her husband, Blake, attempted to discover her true identity, and even the United States Social Security Administration and forensic experts were involved and began investigating her past to determine who she was. It would have been simple with genetic information, but she was already dead. Fortunately, she had a 2-year-old daughter, her only blood relative. The forensics team examined the daughter's genes but not those of her husband Blake. They used that information to compare it to a vast number of DNA samples from across the country. There had to be a legitimate family tied to her someplace. They had to track down her biological family. It took 6 years to complete. Finally, in 2016, they located someone who was a good genetic match. In Philadelphia, a guy named Michael Cassidy approached the caseworker, who showed him a picture of Rory and asked him whether he recognized her. He gave an excellent testimony while staring carefully at the photo. He claimed the woman in the photograph resembled his long-lost relative, Indeed, their genetic information was comparable, indicating that they were connected. The investigation moved rapidly, and family members who knew her came forward one by one, eventually finding her biological mother. The enigma of Rory's identity was finally exposed at this point. Kimberly McLean is her full name. Fortunately, she was neither a criminal nor a spy, but a regular woman. She grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs, the daughter of a carpenter and a stay-at-home mother. When her parents split when she was in her teens, the calm of her family was disrupted. Kimberly was living with her mother at the time, but when her mother remarried, it signaled the start of an unwelcome change of environment. Kimberly, as an adolescent, was perplexed at this moment. She expressed her desire to leave home frequently to her sister. When she became 18, she abruptly moved out of the house and left for good in 1986. They hadn't heard from her in a long time. They have no idea what she did immediately after leaving home. In other words, she left home in 1986 and obtained her driver's license in 1988. We have no idea what happened to her during those 2 years. In any event, I believe Kimberly's purpose was to keep her family and friends from finding her. Life was difficult for her after her parents' unexpected divorce and the entrance of her stepfather. Kimberly had a compelling reason to flee her family, according to investigators. Kimberly's sister, on the other hand, stated that she had no idea why her sister made this decision. What makes today's instance so intriguing is that we have no idea why she had to do it. Perhaps her stepfather abused her severely. Or maybe she didn't want to ruin her remarried mother's happiness, so she just vanished. Clearly, Rory has a dreadful history. But, on the other hand, I wish she had lived well and died with a daughter. Perhaps it was the difficulty of living under a fake identity that proved difficult. She wished for a better life under a guise, but she couldn't tell her husband, the guy she trusted and loved the most in the world, who she truly was. I feel terrible for her when I think about it. Kimberly McLean, not Rory, for choosing a lonely end. I hope she is no longer lonely and has found peace. That concludes the horror tube for the time being. See you in the next chapter.